Final Fantasy VII debuted in 1997 as one of the most expensive games ever made. The game not only put RPGs on the map in the West, it made both Square and the Sony PlayStation household names the world over. With an unbelievable score, cutting-edge graphics that blurred together CG and real-time 3D, and an unforgettable story set in a cyberpunk universe, Final Fantasy VII was a high watermark for the entire industry for years to come. In this, part 1 of 3, I'll be reviewing this classic title, one disc at a time. Without further ado, I give you Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII begins in medias res, as the eco-terrorist cell Avalanche infiltrates the high-security energy reactor in the city of Midgard, Sector 8. Like the other reactors powering the city, this one runs on Mako, a mysterious substance taken from the planet that's given Midgard their very own industrial revolution. The terrorist leader, Barrett, wants to stop the corporation behind Mako Energy, Shinra. Yet ironically to do so, he's evidently turned to a former member of Shinra's own elite unit Soldier, the player character, Cloud. As Cloud, you claim you're only in this for the money, but it's soon revealed it's at least in part an attempt to fulfill a promise Cloud made long ago to a former childhood friend among Avalanche's ranks, Tifa. We learn that Midgar is a visibly stratified society. A plate atop which the wealthier citizens live is literally propped up over the heads of the lower classes, who Shinra have trapped in squalor and social decay below. At the center of Midgar is the Shinra Tower, where all of the company's power and money is concentrated. Meanwhile, the rest of the city is caught in the centrifugal force around Shinra Tower as its axis, living their lives in a no less predetermined course than the ever-circling Midgar trains. When a second reactor raid goes wrong, Cloud falls from the plate into a heretofore unexplored region of the city, Sector 5. It is here, in a dilapidated yet beatific church, Cloud re-encounters a flower girl from the start of the game named Aerith. Cloud and Aerith see Tifa carted off to the manor of the lecherous Don Corneo. To get access, the duo embark on a wild night of debauchery and sexual liberation, culminating in cross-dressing, visiting the hostess club Honeybee Manor, and finally rendezvousing with Tifa in what appears to be an S&M dungeon. The now trio of characters learn not only that Corneo's trying to sniff out Avalanche, but rumor has it that Shinra are planning to detach the Sector 7 plate as retaliation for the terror attacks, killing everyone both above and below that part of the city. The game seems to build to a final showdown with the leader of Midgar, President Shinra himself. But in a brilliant act of subversion, we get caught up in a totally different, much graver storyline involving the mad Shinra scientist Hojo and the reappearance of a legendary warrior named Sefirot. To track down this mysterious silver-haired menace, Cloud and company embark on a globe-spanning quest, one that leads them to the mysterious lost city of the so-called Cetra, or Ancients, of which Aerith is supposedly the last living relative. Sefirot, it's revealed, has an incredibly terrifying plan that dwarfs even Shinra's avarice and megalomania. By causing the planet a great and terrible wound, Sefirot intends to harness its inherent life force, and in effect merge the essences of all beings that ever have or will have lived into his body. But just when it's most important to stop Sefirot from obtaining the dreaded black materia, a magical orb that has the power to summon out of the cosmos a terrifying meteor strike, Cloud begins to reject the player's agency completely. Cloud, in some kind of trance, delivers Sefirot the materia. Then he seems to try to kill Aerith. In one of gaming's most tragic scenes, Sefirot finishes this job for him, jabbing his sword into Aerith and closing her sweet aquamarine-colored eyes once and for all. This one ends on this tragic note, having taken us back not only to tribal societies like the ones we find in Cosmo Canyon and Wutai, and to ruins of ancient civilizations, but seemingly down even into the abyss of the ocean itself. Aerith's body is delivered by Cloud, now lost in the haze of an existential identity crisis and mourning the friend whose life was so bitterly cut short, into the watery depths beneath the city of the ancients. As Square's Tetsuya Nomura told Polygon in 2017, quote, "When a character in a video game dies, no one thinks it's that sad. After all, you can just reset and try again, or you can always revive them somehow. I felt that their lives just didn't have much weight. With life as our theme for FF7, I thought we should try depicting a character who really dies for good, who can't come back. For that death to resonate, it needed to be an important character. So we thought killing off the heroine would allow players to think more deeply about that theme." End quote. Aerith was killed off to not only further FF7's themes, but move the medium forward. Final Fantasy VII was a pioneer of not only 3D, but of a level and style of storytelling that was positively unheard of in the games industry. Beyond the plot itself, FF7 was a detail-oriented experience that fused together elements across multiple mediums to bring its themes, characters, and wider world to life. One example was its poetic use of similar structures in the environment to tie together related themes. We begin the game trying to get down into a Mako reactor, for example, barely returning to the surface with our lives. A similar structured experience can be found over the first entire act of Disc 1, where the player must descend into the depths of Midgar itself before narrowly escaping with our lives once more. And after we leave Midgar, we find another beautiful example of the game's overarching motifs of memories which linger in spirit long after their bodies have faded, and which don't always overlap with actual reality, and the deceptive tranquility of the small village called Calm. It is in this same town where Cloud will recount his memory of meeting Sephiroth back in a completely different small town, Nibelheim, that we find structural echoes in how both towns are designed, from the spiral staircase to the small children to the location of the inns and the centerpieces in the middle of both towns. This not only saved resources somewhat, it brought through gameplay and environment the strange sense of the uncanny that FF7 as a whole sought to conjure. One of my favorite cases in point here also happens when Aerith's mother, Elmira, tells the party about Aerith's origins. The way the scene seems to weave across time, blurring the lines between the past and present, shows, not tells, the premise that it all happened here in this same house. It's all in a way still happening, still with us. Memories are still with us even as only memories. It's an unbelievably powerful theme that the game will use Aerith in particular to express time and time again, and in more ways than one. Another example of this is with Barrett and his origin story that we see gradually unfold once we reach the former mining town, Coral. From its appearance, the desolation of the town could have happened yesterday. Yet it's been 4 long years since a Mako reactor accident caused Shinra to attack Coral and burn it to the ground. The player is sent in the midst of Barrett's tragic retelling to the Gold Saucer, a gaudy yet grand play place we can't help but recognize for all its glittering emptiness. The activities are serious ripoffs, and we soon realize the Gold Saucer in a way is just another Midgar, complete even with a literal underworld, where yet again the less fortunate are left to rot, degraded by the very golden paradise that they now ironically long to escape into instead of from. When violence breaks out and Cloud and company are the ones to get blamed, we're led to believe the culprit is none other than Barrett. But in truth, it's Barrett's sort of dark twin, Dine, the man who also attached a gun to his body as a replacement for the missing hand that he lost to Shinra, that he now too, like Barrett, lives to avenge, as a symbol for everything that was lost in the fire. But Dine, when we confront him, is stuck on a cliff, one that resembles the exact same sort of dead drop where he got injured 4 years ago. The memory is still with him, which we can also see from these crosses that resemble grave markers for the wife and daughter he believes he's lost. Another mini Midgar awaits us also as Junon Harbor, where a formerly quaint fishing village now sits under the polluted shadow of yet another Shinra city in the sky. One of the greatest sequences in Disc 1 has to be the flashback sequence of Clouds that I mentioned earlier. What makes it so great is how it isn't presented as an objective recounting, but rather as a subjective one, mediated through Cloud interactively as our unreliable narrator. Though the broad strokes may be fixed in advance, where Cloud goes and who he talks to is completely up to the player. This brings interactivity into a memory, driving home the core conceit, yet again, that we remember things as human beings not by going completely back to the past as it really existed, but by reinventing it, or maybe just inventing it whole cloth, in the present. Another amazing and thematically related sequence occurs with Red XIII in Cosmo Canyon. Red's been told a version of history that's untrue, told that his father was a coward. To show him, not tell him, the truth, Red's grandpa Bugenhagen takes the party down into the depths of the canyon's caverns, the very same location that we soon learn that Seto, Red's father, had his last stand against the tribal invaders, the Gi, and kept in the process the whole village safe. Seto, and this is really crucial to the themes of the entire game, still lives on as a stone statue, having been petrified by the Gi's poisonous javelins. He embodies the idea that the past still lives on in some form, albeit an altered form, as spirit in the present. And the scene where Red bawls at the moon as his father's statue drips fresh tears may be one of the single most indelible images of the entire game. Of course, sometimes, as I said, how a thing is remembered has nothing to do with reality. This complicates the central theme, and we experience it firsthand when we go back to Nibelheim in the present, only to find it perfectly preserved as Cloud remembered it prior to Sephiroth's Great Fire. The sense of the uncanny sinks in when looking around reveals the town has been overrun with mysterious figures clad in black cloaks, and townspeople who have no recollection either of Cloud or of any big fire. This pulling the rug out from under our feet that only begins here and climaxes in Disc 2 may be one of the single most subversive moments in all of gaming. As you can see, FF7 plays out in different scenarios that all to some extent speak to the same central themes and use the same central motifs with unbelievable poetic consistency. The game also draws from a number of diverse world myths and cultural fantasias to prove that even video games can be more than entertainment, that they too can be part of culture. Many different cultural touchstones would be referenced by FF7 in fact. Apart from the name of one party member which derives from the Scottish and Celtic fairy creature Cat Sith, FF7 would draw considerable inspiration from an intriguing synthesis, especially in light of how much of the game's aesthetic derives from the era of World War II. That synthesis was between the Sefirot, of the sect of Jewish mysticism Kabbalah, and the magnum opus of one of opera's biggest geniuses, yet also one of its most beloved musicians by the Third Reich of Nazi Germany, Richard Wagner and his Ring Cycle. Many not only names but themes in Final Fantasy VII are allusions to Der Ring des Nibelungen, an epic opera saga which, after all, also inspired Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. One can only speculate that by fusing elements of it with ontology and mysticism derived from the Jewish occult, FF7 attempts to extricate the beauty and profundity of the Ring operas somewhat from their admittedly anti-Semitic context. After all, in FF7, the greediest and most exploitative characters are those of Shinra, an organization dominated by men and women who often appear as so-called Aryans, a disproven racial classification that the Nazis believed was evident in the traits of blonde hair and blue eyes. One of Shinra's top people, in case this deconstruction of Wagner and Hitler wasn't clear enough, is named after a dyed-in-the-wool Nazi philosopher, Heidegger. The closest analog to Jewish people in FF7, meanwhile, would probably have to be the ancients themselves, who the evil Shinra wished to exploit and even replace, using bizarre eugenics and obsessive Nazi-like searches for buried artifacts and ancient prophecies. This combination, which would have been borderline heresy for any real Nazi, goes a long way to assuage any fears that by conjuring Wagner, Final Fantasy VII is some sort of crypto-Nazi screed. If Wagner's implicit antisemitism is turned upside down like this, we find a far less racist and all the more powerful social critique of the industrial age upon which FF7 builds itself. Just listen to how opera expert Burton D. Fisher describes the background and themes of Wagner's Ring Cycle here, taken at length from Opera Classics Library's Companion to the Ring of the Nibelung. Quote, Wagner's ancient mythological sources for his music drama Colossus, The Ring of the Nibelung, portrayed a turbulent world in which sinister and evil forces unconscionably lusted for power. He adapted the basic universal themes of those myths to create an allegory to deconstruct the moral values of his century's contemporary world. The Ring's underlying conflicts and tensions expressed Wagner's moral outrage at the decadence and degeneration of his society's philosophical, political, social, and economic values. The Industrial Revolution had transformed society through its rapid changes in methods and mechanization. There was a new focus on machine rather than land, and in that transition new classes of society emerged. The bourgeoisie and middle classes became the new claimants to the old legitimacy, and a large class of working poor clamored for social progress. A greater disparity arose between wealth and poverty, provoking deeper divisions to emerge in the social order. By the mid-19th century, European society seemed to have become more profoundly divided by political, social, and economic realities. It was a division that created new claims to power and ever more dramatically separated the dominators from the dominated, the wealthy from the poor. As Wagner viewed his contemporary society, he became a cultural pessimist, perceiving his world as decadent, immoral, and unjust, a degeneration that was the result of an obsessive lust for material wealth and power that he considered the root of all evil. In Twilight of the Gods, part of the Ring Cycle, the old order of gods is destroyed in a cataclysm, what Wagner considered a necessary retribution for their despicable evil and the forced imposition of their will. But Wagner concluded the Ring Saga with a profound sense of hope. Wagner's pessimism and skepticism were synonymous with the ideology of the Romantic movement in art, literature, and music. To those pessimists, the Romanticists, the drama of human history was approaching doomsday, and civilization was on the verge of vanishing completely. Romanticists became preoccupied with the conflict between nature and human nature. Industrialization and modern commerce were considered the despoilers of the natural world. Steam engines and smokestacks were viewed as dark manifestations of commerce and veritable images from hell. But natural man, uncorrupted by commercialism, was ennobled. So Romanticism sought escapes from society's horrible realities by appealing to strong emotions, the bizarre and the irrational, the instincts of self-gratification, and the search for pleasure and sensual delights. The underlying message of his saga would advocate the destruction of society's existing power structures and its authoritarianism in an apocalyptic cataclysm. As such, in a world reborn, humanity would be redeemed, and the man of the future would emerge, a man of free will who would satisfy his instinctive need for mutual love and inspire fellowship. Midgard takes its name from Midgard, the Norse myth of mankind's original home. Given that Midgard was built out of the body of the first created being in the myth, the giant Argelmir, and that Midgard in Final Fantasy VII runs on energy harvested from the planet's life force, which in turn is made up of the spirits of every living being who ever has or ever will live, the parallels between Norse mythology and Final Fantasy VII are obvious, as they are numerous. I love how the Midgard myth informs the opening of the game even. After all, to quote Encyclopedia Britannica, in Midgard, the sun, moon, and stars were made of scattered sparks that were caught in Argelmir's skull. We fade from the celestial bodies to sparks occurring not only in front of Aerith, the last ancient, meaning the last of the first humans to ever harness the energy of the planet, but also as a symbol for the sparks of pain that she alone can perceive crying out from the planet inside her own skull, and inside the dome that is the Earth. The name Nibelheim, meanwhile, derives from yet another Nordic myth, Niflheim, quote, the cold, dark, misty world of the dead, ruled by the goddess Hel, end quote. We also see aspects of the Middle Ages and pre-modern European history in FF7, which speaks perhaps to its dystopian themes. The Shinra soldiers resemble knights, while the lecherous Don Corneo could come right out of a commedia dell'arte from the 16th century. The story of Cloud somewhat resembles, for that matter, the tale of Don Quixote, a half-mad knight who mistakes the present as the past and himself as a famous knight. Conversely, we also find in FF7 elements and allusions back even further to antiquity. The Temple of the Ancients is a fusion between an Aztec temple, where notably human beings were offered up as sacrifices, an Egyptian pyramid where often pharaohs would be entombed and preserved for future generations, and a Hellenic pagan temple as well. Even the name Sefirot is a nod to a very old word, Sefirot, which comes from Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah, and refers to, quote, the 10 emanations or powers by which God the Creator was said to become manifest, end quote, by way of Wikipedia. One of the Sephiroth may be the ancestor word of the character named Tifa, in fact, Tiferet, meaning beauty. The belief system of Kabbalah seems to also have informed aspects of FF7's ontology, its theory of being, given that, quote, Kabbalah sees the human soul as mirroring the divine, and more widely all creations as reflections of their life source in the Sefirot, end quote. The way FF7 uses language and culture derived from long-dead eras speaks also to the same themes of memory and recurring patterns still alive in the present in altered form that we've been discussing all along. FF7 was truly a masterpiece that moved the medium forward as that rare combination of financial and artistic success. Fittingly, the game has begun to be remade, changing its form and even aspects of its narrative even as it's still in the process of being retold. I couldn't imagine a more fitting approach to a reunion with this game, which, after all, was always about the inability to ever completely return to the past, yet at the same time, the equal inability to ever completely get rid of it. Until next time, boss.